So, if you've been following cultural politics or social life at all, you will have noticed since about the mid 2010s, 2014, something like that, and maybe tracing it back to the Occupy Wall Street movement, that there have been an increasing number of people who are willing to throw out much of science and much of material reality on the grounds of arbitrary power and social constructivism. Like this idea that much of the world is socially constructed, everything personal, everything human centric, everything psychological, everything social, everything economic. These are all social constructions. They're effectively completely divorced from biology. You see the transgender people in this. You see people who are, particularly women, who are hypersexual and they cannot cope with the results of their actions. All of this stuff, it has its roots in postmodern philosophy, which is an incorporeal philosophy. It's has its deep roots in the idea of the soul, and that the soul is in this sort of like Democritean Socratic sense is this Socratic daemon that exists as an abstract rational force outside of the mind, outside of the brain, outside of the body. They're very disincarnate people. They don't have a proper respect for the biological nature of their passions. And as a result of this, it can lead them into some very self destructive behaviors that they can endlessly rationalize using logic because they have no real connection to their own felt experience except for fear, shame. All that stuff is repressed, though. It's repressed and rationalized by their logical mind, which they view as a separate entity, completely disincarnate from their body and their desires. This is where you can get people who are claiming to be two spirit, people who are claiming to be trans, people who are saying that their social identity is completely detached from their biology in any meaningful way. Why has this been allowed to flourish? Why does this seem to not go away, even when the data is in statistical data, data which I find to be completely irrefutable, uh, especially by like when you look at the arguments being presented against the biological view of man, the incarnate view of man, the idea that your body is the prime generator of culture, that cultures spring up around biological norms. That's why they tend to, follow these evolutionary constructs. That's why religion tends to favor adaptive behavior. That's why religion is selected for in evolution. Um, why are we seeing these people, this growing community of people who are completely disincarnate? They're completely in their heads. They have no connection to their biology, to their body. I think primarily it's a deep flaw in the human organism that now it's also a great strength of ours. It allows us to abstract and build things, but this idea that you have a disembodied rational soul, this is something that we all experience. It's something we all feel, but and it's not entirely an illusion because we do have the ability to self-reflect, which very few animals, if any, but us have. Um, but there's this insistence in the this community of people, these people who are totally disincarnate. They're willing to throw biology under the bus in favor of their own rationalizations. There's this theory that these people universally, whether implicitly or explicitly, unconsciously or consciously, retain, and it's that everything is to do with power dynamics and everything is to do with with gratifying the ego. So if you, make an argument against them on biological grounds, they'll proceed to tell you that, the only reason that you're making that argument is because you have a certain bias as a result of your character that it forces you to make that argument. You're a mouthpiece for your identity, which is kind of weird when you juxtapose it with the idea that identity doesn't exist or it's just a social contraption. But that being said, they're not necessarily concerned with coherence because they view coherence as a way to attain power, or logical coherence as an illusion and a tool to attain social dominance. Now, this very basic sort of like lowest form of rationality that exists to bolster one's status, to rationalize one's identity, which is poorly formed. If you don't have an identity, your self-conscious mind is going to spin off rationalizations about what you want, these fantasies about what you want, these logical statements, these if-then statements about what your identity should be or what you feel your identity should be. Now, my basic view on this is that it's a sort of Freudian repression. So the healthy way that lowest form of ego, that lowest form of self-consciousness manifests itself is you're trying to catalyze an identity through your desires. So your brain is constantly chucking up these rationalizations, like molding over words, thinking about things, observing your fantasies, and that's a stage in human development. That the ultimate result of that stage, it's a very destructive stage, but the ultimate result of that stage exists to make you understand what you do desire by analyzing your fantasies and spinning off these rational statements. You can, in theory, come closer and closer to your desires until you pretty much know what they are. Now, if somebody feels oppressed in their ability to get their desires, those fantasies can become tainted by delusions and malignant, resentful thoughts. And, Freud would call this, I'm not really a Freudian, but I think he summed it up pretty well, and he's the most popular person who's done this, is they repress the idea that they can't get what they want because that's too painful. You see this also in male MGTOW guys and male incel type characters who they want women so bad, and they want this like they want sex or a relationship or whatever. Usually it's sex because what do they know about love? They don't have any experience with sex, let alone love. These people, they fixate so hard on these rationalizations for why they don't want love, for why women are bad for them, for why they'll point to these anecdotal examples of where relationships have fucked up. You see this with atheists too. Atheists who I believe have this deep need for knowledge, for this finite sort of settled rest of knowledge. Science is an infinite endeavor. You can never have enough scientific theories to account for a worldview. They're always adapting, endlessly changing. But they've undermined their ability to believe in grand narratives, these atheists, so they're basically stuck on this infinite treadmill of science, and I think that breeds deep resentment because they can't get a sense of mental peace. They're always analyzing and using these if-then statements to, which is a very low-grade form of reasoning, to because there's an infinite number of them. You could say an if-then statement about everything in this room, and you would never, ever stop spouting off code. Versus if you just tell a story about it, it satisfies your purposes, more or less. Though it is incomplete, but so are the if-then statements. But so anyway, back to these postmodern people. They're spinning off rationalizations because they don't have the knowledge or wherewithal, or maybe they're just crippled, they're biologically fucked up, and they feel like maybe this is true, maybe it isn't. They feel like they can't get what they want, what they deeply, deeply want. So they're spinning off rationalizations to cope with the pain of rejection from the universe and society in general, which may as well be the universe for people, in the same way that the ant hill's the universe to the ant. They spin off these logical rationalizations that are completely devoid from their own biology, in the same way that the MGTOW people, they have a biological imperative to seek out companionship, but they've been rejected, they've been hurt, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're seething with hatred, and they spin off rationalizations in order to cope with the pain of not being able to reach that goal of union with another person. And, the Marxist, postmodernist types, I think they feel deeply let down by society, and maybe they are. I know it's not fair. It doesn't favor everyone. There are people who are never going to get what they want. It's fucked, but it's the way it is. And, they spin off rationalizations that are completely devoid of their own biological reality and their own desires. They spin off rationalizations as to why those desires aren't really worth it, why having a sense of identity that's catalyzed and cohesive is not worth it, why it's actually impossible, why people who do have an identity are delusional. And they do that because they are basically mentally fragmented and they don't have a sense of identity, and they feel like they'll never be able to incorporate a sense of identity. And that's my analysis of that.